everybody, and welcome to KITT, Key Ideas Table Talk. This is our first ever KITT video, and I'm super excited to have Greg Steeves here with me today, who is a speech language pathologist. So thank you so much for being a part of the very first one.
My pleasure, Sharilyn.
So excited. So we're going to start off with a couple of questions just so people have a better idea what it is that you do. So firstly, can you kind of explain to our viewers what is speech language pathology?
Well, speech language pathology is a profession within the whole field of communication disorders. And it looks at if somebody has difficulty in terms of something being taken away from the content of what they're saying to how they're delivering it. So for example, if they have a problem with stuttering, or if they have a problem with pronouncing their sounds, that kind of thing.
Very cool. So what is it that you help with in that field, so as a speech language pathologist?
Well, of course, I work primarily with elementary students, mostly kindergarten through grade 3, and there would be probably 4 different areas. So in addition to stuttering and helping with speech sound disorders, I also help with children who have difficulty with their language development, understanding and using language, and some children chronically misuse their voice, so as a result they tend to be hoarse a lot of the time. So voice disorders are something that I work with as well, and sometimes there are children who are nonverbal, so we're involved with finding augmentative communication systems to help supplement if they don't really have a voice to express themselves.
So let's say a student's nonverbal, what kind of stuff do you put into place for a student who would be nonverbal for communication?
Well, usually we would start with something very low-tech at first, so it might be like a picture system, like PACS, the Picture Exchange Communication System, and then we gradually go to things that are more and more high-tech, so that sometimes when we get to older children, they can have what they need on a phone, which is very cool. Everybody has a phone in high school, but they can use that as a communication device with actually a speech synthesizer in it for their voice.
That is so cool. It's so neat that we have that accessibility now in our modern world, that we start very simple, but then you can kind of move forward. That's amazing. What are the most common speech disorders that you come across?
In the school system, by far, probably articulation disorders would be the most common, followed pretty closely by language issues. And then I see a fair number of kids who need some kind of an augmentative system, who are nonverbal, and the least common would be probably the stuttering and the voice problems.
Okay, so I would feel like most people would assume that stuttering would be one of the most common speech
Yes.
pieces that would be missing, which is interesting because that's always like, I know that I'm guilty of that. When you assume something, you often assume wrong, but that's
so true.
It's really neat to know that that's the case, that it's actually not true. So what is the referral process in the school system versus out of the school system?
Well, in the school system, we've come to the process now. 6.5 years ago, all of our team were moved over from health to education. So now that we're part of Anglophone East, all of our referrals come by way of the school-based teams. So usually it's a parent or a classroom teacher who has a concern, will bring the concern to the school-based team, and they usually just rubber stamp it, and then a referral is done online. In contrast, if you have like a speech language pathologist who works in a private setting or in a hospital setting, those are more open referral systems. So generally, in the past in hospitals, they only accepted referrals from public health nurses and family doctors, but now they have a more open referral policy. So parents, spouses can refer, or even sometimes we get self-referrals as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you find that, is there a lot of self-referrals, especially with the older population? Is that more what it is, or is it more?
It does,
high
yeah,
school
definitely happen. And also you might have a middle school student who's just sort of fed up with their stuttering problem, or a high school problem, student who maybe still lisps, and they go to their classroom teacher and say, listen, I really need some help.
Okay.
So it tends to be the older students and adults, of course,
That's
too.
super neat. Interesting. So what do you start with when you start to assess a new case that you're working with?
Usually one of 2 things. First thing I try to do is to check in with parents, with teachers, and to do a classroom observation, because then you're kind of getting an idea of what the communication is like in the actual setting and how the child is doing and coping with communication there. The second thing that I try to do is to take a little look at the student's cue file. So I kind of get an idea of the background, usually information like the IDA that was completed before the child started kindergarten gives me an idea, or if there were some services that were done as a preschooler.
Okay. Do you find a lot of students will come in with speech before and you continue with it, or is it less common?
Not as often as you would hope.
Okay.
There are still a number of students who come to kindergarten, and I have kindergarten teachers coming to me and saying, Greg, help, I don't understand a thing that this child is saying. Where do I start? And when you do a little bit exploring, for whatever reason, that child has fallen through the cracks and hasn't
Right.
received services as a preschooler, which would have been really, really helpful before they even start.
Very interesting. What is a common misconception about what you do as a speech language pathologist?
Well, one of them certainly is that all we work with is stuttering problems.
Mhm,
So sometimes I find in social situations, people will say, oh, you're a speech therapist. Well, what causes stuttering? Or what's the cure for stuttering? It's like, those aren't easy answers. And the second misconception would be, rather than thinking of us as speech language pathologists, it's just as a speech therapist. So, oh, you just basically work and help people to pronounce their sounds, and that's all that you do.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of people aren't aware. I don't come across it so much in the school system, but we also have a role with feeding and swallowing issues.
Oh.
Yeah, called dysphagia. So that would happen more so with my colleagues who work in the hospital setting, with preschoolers who are born and maybe have difficulty as infants learning to suck and to get the proper nutrition.
Okay.
So that's part of our scope of practice as well.
That's so interesting. A lot of things that I did not know. Greg's going to be joining us for a couple more videos, which is exciting, kind of diving in deeper to some more things, which I'm really excited about. Thank you so much for being a part of this today.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.